Nothing contained in this podcast should be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. This content does not represent our respective employers and is purely the opinion of the podcast hosts. We are not your personal medical providers. Sorry, friends. So, if you have concerns or seeking a diagnosis or treatment, please seek individual advice from a healthcare provider in your area. We are not liable for any risks associated with acting upon the information contained in this podcast. This is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only, so enjoy the ride.
Please drink responsibly and in moderation. Before drinking, please be sure to be of the legal drinking age for your country. We do not encourage the misuse of alcohol.
Welcome to Medical Media Mixer, the perfect cocktail. I'm Nicole Peniston, psychologist.
And I'm Tara Prisco, physician assistant. All right. What's up, lady?
I was thinking, as I was making my drink, that I really would enjoy some Olive Garden for dinner, but I don't want to go outside, although it's only raining now, so.
Yeah. So it's funny. Where was I? Oh, I took my oldest to go shopping for her winter semi-formal
fun.
for 8th grade. And we were figuring out what we were going to have for dinner, like right before or after. And there was an Olive Garden over there. She's like, I've never been there. She's like, I don't want to. I was like, I said, it's ghetto Italian food, but it's like fun and it's good, like for like what it is.
It's
like your
Italian food, yeah.
Your whatever expectation, it's not bad. She's like, I will only eat grandma's Italian food.
Oh.
So.
Well, I'm sure it doesn't compare, but still, like, it's food.
It's food. We ended up getting sushi, which worked out. And so the mall near me is demolished,
yes,
and is being built into whatever. But the Macy's still exists there, and the Boscov's, and a few things. Like so, they like got rid of the mall in the middle.
Those are interesting choices to
left
leave
like
standing.
The things. But I have to say, Macy's is dying.
That's why I said it's weird that they left that standing.
It's a whole store full of stuff, but there's like nobody working.
Yeah, and it's a hot mess always.
Nobody. And yeah, I mean, we did find something, thank goodness. She only tried on like 6 or 7 dresses. And honestly, she's a size 1. Everything's going to look good on her.
Oh, God, yes.
But it was just the one that made her like, she liked
that
the
she
most.
liked, yeah.
And the price was good. It was good.
One of my early jobs was working in Macy's men's department, suits department. So that was fun because I got to help pick out like ties and like handkerchiefs and stuff like that, dress shirts.
Nice. The husband had gone there back when the mall existed trying to buy a suit. And he was like, there's like nothing here. There's nobody here to help you.
I mean, Macy's men's suit department, I don't know if all of the Macy's still have them, but they were pretty pricey back in the day. So I don't think necessarily it was the go-to, especially with like those larger chains now, but still.
But like back in the day, formal dresses, I used to always get there. My first like interview suit when I graduated, I got from there. It's just a bygone era sort of a thing. It was interesting.
Sadly. Yeah. Oh, well. We're old. It's official. We're old now.
It is.
We're old. I need to watch my cholesterol, apparently, which I don't even know how to do. I don't know what cholesterol is in, but mine's too high.
It's in animal fats. I have naturally.
Which is weird because I don't eat that much. I don't eat that much chicken. I don't eat that much beef. I eat a lot of seafood, but my cholesterol was high. I also have a theory that my blood work was faked.
Okay.
So what happened was, I went to the local LabCorp, got my blood work, had my script, went about it, everything went fine. And normally, like, you'll get, like, because I have their portal and everything, you'll get something before the doctor does. And it was a full, like, 9 days and nothing. And then I called them and I left a voicemail. And 4 hours later, there were results. But everything was normal except for cholesterol. And I'm like, none of my labs have ever been that normal. Like, I have severe iron deficiency anemia. My iron is always low.
Right.
My iron was like beautiful. I was like, I don't think this is my blood work. I think they faked it. They're like, oh yeah, fat lady came in, high cholesterol, done. Like, I don't think it's my real blood work.
So they can get, like, we in the office, we draw it in our office, but send the blood work to certain labs. And we just had one the other day where it didn't come back forever. And it was a name discrepancy, but they just said one letter was off on something, and that's why they held it. But there can be mix-ups of things. Absolutely. Yeah. Labeling, things can happen.
I don't think it was. And then, like, how on, like, LabCorp, but also other labs, you can, like, track the trends over time. And, like, my trends that were always a certain way, this was totally off. I'm like, I don't think this is my blood work.
No, I agree.
But, I have no way. What am I going to do? Fight them for it? Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to have blood work done again eventually. I mean, I'm not shocked that my cholesterol's high, but
it's a lot of it's genetics, though. A lot of it's not as much diet as we think. But full fat dairy, cheese, butter, those all have cholesterol. Shellfish does, but other fish are good.
Yeah. Cheese I probably eat a fair amount of, but I'm an almond milk, coconut milk girl in my coffee. Yeah. I don't really have a lot of butter.
Yeah. Genetics.
eat like red meat maybe once a week, if that. So yeah.
I have high cholesterol too. It's literally since I was like the size one that my daughter is now. Yeah. So it's just genetics.
Well, I suspect that I am that new potential type of diabetes, the 1.5, who always like hovers around prediabetes, because I've had prediabetes for like 20 years and the number has never gone up, but it's also never gone down.
Right.
And like I've had, I've had significant weight fluctuations in the last 20 years.
And it hasn't changed. Yeah. Yep.
So I feel like I'm that person, but whatever.
You're special.
Yeah. I've got all the fun things to have wrong with me.
We all got our shit.
But I don't have a brain aneurysm, so yay.
Glad to hear it.
I do have severe sinusitis, which I already knew about. Apparently that came up on the MRI.
How do you do well in MRI machines? How do you do with
Please, I don't even care. It was funny. She was like, what music do you want? I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to listen to? Like, whatever. She's like, well, we don't hear it. I'm like, well, you surprised me. So she rolls me in and it was just a brain MRA, which is much shorter. So she's like, it'll be like 15 minutes. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. And I've had a million MRIs, so I'm used to the sounds or whatever. So, they put me in the face cage and they roll me in and I got the headphones on and I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for my spa music because that's what she decided. And all I hear is and it was fine, like I didn't care, but she rolls me out. I was like, your spa music sounds like I'm in the club. And she was like, what? I was like, it sounded more like EDM than spa. And like she didn't get it. And I was like, the music wasn't playing. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to turn it on. I was like, I was making a joke, but you didn't get it.
She didn't get it.
She didn't get it. But yeah, if an EDM producer out there needs some inspo MRI machines, because that sounds like, the bass is about to drop at any minute.
Yes, at any moment. Wait, so random association. I went to Pilates today, and this one instructor, I like her classes are good, but her music choices.
Uh-oh.
She's probably like in her early 50s. Like she's not old.
But and you only say that because we are in our mid to late 40s
now. Her music choices, I would classify as mostly the dinner music they play during a wedding. Like when you're not up dancing when food is served. Like ballads of like the 80s.
Elevator music, kind of?
No, ballads. Like, that one with like Kenny Rogers and someone else.
To you,
and like you there's Andre Bocelli. Apparently he has one with Mariah Carey. And like it's
for Pilates. I mean, I guess you don't want the club music at Pilates either, but still.
But it's an interesting choice.
Sounds like an interesting choice.
Today it didn't start out that way. It started out with whatchamacallit. Who are the people? Sorry, brain.
Black Eyed Peas.
No. We Will Rock You. What's his name?
Queen.
It started out with Queen. Okay. So there are like 2 or 3 Queen songs, but like, whatever. And then it went
also, I need to see the nails because I know you got them done.
Yeah. Are we both blue?
We are. We're matchy.
We're very close in color. Yes. And then it went to some song, could have been like David Cassidy, maybe something of that time period. And then it went to Prince. And then it went to wedding dinner music. So
that was the time for the break, apparently.
I don't know. Again, like her classes, just very interesting music.
Interesting. Maybe you need to like record her a mixtape and just slide it to her and be like, psst, try this.
Once in a while there'll be one like that I'll be like, all right, I'm jamming out. But for the most part, that's it. Yeah.
I would imagine Pilates is probably a difficult class to choose music for.
There's very different like tracks. Everyone has their own little thing. Yeah, it depends on the class, I guess, too. It's not going to be like pumping like you're doing like, a Zumba class type of thing.
That's what I need in yoga class because I fall asleep. I'm like, what?
Okay. Oh, my goodness. All right. You're up today.
I am. And ironically, in our last episode, we were talking about the black licorice, anise, fennel flavor scents. And apparently that's in my drink today, and I didn't even know it.
And you said that you weren't a huge fan. So
we'll see. Luckily, my drink is very small.
Okay.
So
wow.
it's, yes. I think my old fashioned glass is too big, but that's okay. So my drink is called the Asylum.
Uh-oh.
Gives you a little preview about what we're going to talk about. And it is supposed to be 1 dash of grenadine. When I unscrewed my grenadine, I took the little stopper thing off by accident. So I got a nice pour of grenadine instead of a dash, but that's okay.
Fine.
So you pour in 1 dash of grenadine first, followed by 1 ounce of Pernod, which is whatever this anise flavored situation is. And then 1 ounce of dry London gin. And that's it. Toss in a couple of ice cubes. It says you're supposed to let the ice melt a little bit because it changes the color. It really just so it says that the Pernod clouds up. I can see that, but it doesn't necessarily change the color.
Okay.
And
what is Pernod? I have no.
So we're gonna have to Google it because it smells like licorice. What is Pernod? What is Pernod? It's like a liqueur. I know that.
Okay.
It is a popular French anise flavored liqueur.
Okay.
Yes, known for a strong licorice taste of star anise, fennel, and herbs like mint and coriander. Okay. It's a historic spirit linked to absinthe.
Okay.
Which also turns milky white when mixed with water. So I think that's why, because it does turn like cloudy.
Haven't you had absinthe? Isn't that a thing?
I have. I have had absinthe. I had absinthe.
Amsterdam, right?
In Amsterdam, but also in New Orleans. And in New Orleans, I had it with the egg in it, which...
Oh, yeah.
It
doesn't sound good to me.
It was the 5th stop in a 5-stop pub crawl.
Okay.
I know I drank it. Couldn't tell you what it tasted like.
Yeah.
It wasn't like raw egg. It was like,
Still.
how like cloud foam is egg in it. It was like that. But
I don't know.
I drank it. I didn't hate it. But I also had multiple drinks before that. So who knows? And I was also 20 years younger than I am today.
Correct.
So, so that's my drink. Let me taste it because I only smelled it when I was pouring it. I was like, ooh, we were just talking about this. So. I don't hate it, but it is a very strong black licorice flavor.
Okay.
Very, very strong.
Okay. So you need to know that,
Yeah. If I was going to make it again for myself and like actually drink the whole thing, spoiler alert, I'm probably not going to drink this whole thing. I would need to cut it with something.
Right.
That being said, it's only 1 ounce of that and 1 ounce of gin in here. So it's a very strong drink. So I'd probably have to cut it either way.
Okay. Gotcha.
But I don't hate it.
Okay.
I don't know what the point of putting the grenadine in there is because it certainly didn't add any flavor.
No.
Just added some color. And I probably put too much in there. So that's my drink, is the Asylum. And that's it. That was that complicated of a drink.
Okay, episode over. Done. No,
Yeah.
Just kidding.
So the book that I'm going to cover today was a very heavy book. I did finally read it. I read the whole thing. I finished it yesterday. I was so proud of myself. Yes. I was determined to finish it. So the title of the book is called Madness. Let me give you the full title. Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum. So this book is written by a wonderful author. Her last name is Hylton, like Hylton.
Okay.
Antonia Hylton. I was like, wait, I know her first name. It's somewhere. So she wrote this book her background is she is an investigative reporter. And she's a journalist with NBC. So she spent over 10 years investigating, reporting, figuring out, connecting with families, getting archival materials to piece together the history of a particular asylum in the South called Crownsville Hospital, which is in Maryland. And it was one of the last remaining segregated asylums in the nation. And it opened in 1911, I can tell you that. And it was open for 93 years. So you can do the math.
Wow.
But it was open for a long time. The grounds have now been made into, the plan is for them to make it partially into a museum. And then the rest is supposed to be like an open community space, like a park, all things like that. But the book essentially traces the history of mental health treatment or lack thereof in the African American community and why it kind of progressed or lacked progression the way that it did. And so the book gives you a lot of really great historical context for a lot of these things. And also it mirrors the last book that I talked about, or the book before last, when I was talking about the Morlock girls, or the Ghanaian quadruplets, and how the history was interwoven into their story, similar history interwoven into this story, just from that different perspective, from the Black minority perspective and the racism that is pervasive in the system, versus with the girls, it was more just general ways that society looked at mental health and treatment and things like that. So the book is really good. It's very, very heavy, I will tell you that, but it's an important read because it helps us reflect on experiences of minority populations, specifically the African-American population, and how they've been treated differently in the system of mental health, how there was systemic racism for a very long time, and then the ways that we can go about changing that, and also why there is that distrust from a lot of African-American communities of the psychiatry and psychology system, because a lot of the stuff that went on back in the day. Now, of course, when we're looking back into 1911, 1912, and even up to 1930s, 1940s, mental health treatment wasn't great for anyone, but it was particularly bad for these folks. So Crownsville is in Maryland, as I was saying, and this particular hospital, interesting history, it was built literally from the ground up by 12 Black men who later became patients there. So they had to build their own damn hospital.
Wow.
Yes. And a lot of the early days, very much of it felt more like slave labor, even though slavery was abolished. And so these were free men, but they were really kind of seeking to find where they would go. A lot of them did have mental health or physical health issues or behavioral issues. And so this was felt to be the best place to send them. But a lot, like, they were basically they built the hospital from the ground up, literally foundation up. They were manning the hospital, cooking, cleaning, making their own clothes, basically providing their own quote unquote treatment. Because at that time, that was what was considered treatment, was this old school idea of occupational therapy. It's not what occupational therapy is now, but
not at all.
This old idea that the more you give someone purpose in the form of work, that the better they will manage their mental health issues, because it gives them something to do. It gives them something to focus on, something to put their energy in, and hopefully the act of producing something is going to give you that wherewithal to fight through any mental health issues that you would have going on. In context, at the same time, there was a lot of misunderstanding about with the abolishment of slavery and Black people now being free, a lot of racism in the culture, thinking that, oh, well, Black people don't know how to be free. White people have to tell them what to do. And without the leadership of white people, that's why Black people are committing crimes and are crazy and are this and are that. We all know that is completely not true. Didn't want to get those words mixed up. We know that was not true, but that was the mindset, the very incorrect mindset at the time. And so that really established what mental health treatment looked like, because there was this idea that we have to tell these people what to do and how to be, because they don't know. They're wild savages otherwise. So of course, with that sort of mindset, now you're going into a hospital and now they're hiring people to come in who are all white at this point. They're going to have that racist mentality towards these patients who they're supposed to be helping. Now, when we look in context, mental health, quote unquote, treatment at that time really wasn't much more than clothing people, housing people, giving them jobs to do, and that was it. Some of the people who had, quote unquote, less problems were essentially loaned out as free labor to local businesses, companies, farms. So they would get to leave the asylum during the day and go work on a farm. And I say get to leave, like you're really just being leased out to go work somewhere else for the day and then come back. Yeah. Because the hospital was getting paid for this. As it goes through the years, we see the connection between the mental health system and the criminal justice system, not just for African-American people, but very heavily based there, where if someone was being a problem on the street and you were picked up by police, you would either go to jail and then later go to court, or you get dropped off at the mental health asylum. And so that was very common for people of any race, but disproportionately African-American people, and to children as well. So there's several stories where children as young as 5, 6 years old were being dropped off at an asylum because they were out on the streets. Wow. There's a story of one little kid, which this happens way later in history than I'm comfortable with. I want to say it was in the 70s. He was a 6-year-old boy, and he was out on the street in his little karate uniform, clearly just came out of karate class, practicing some karate moves.
Oh, no.
And they picked up this little boy and dropped him off at the asylum because he was violent and aggressive.
Oh, my goodness.
Luckily, at that point in time, the staff was more integrated. So there were both white and Black doctors who were both, on the same page as far as what appropriate treatment was, who were not cool with this little kid getting dropped off by police and didn't trust the police either, because they're like, well, if we send him away, number one, a lot of times they were not allowed to turn people away from asylums. They had to accept them, even if they were not appropriate. But they were like, well, if we tell him, like, no, we're not taking him, what are they going to do with him? Because they're already not treating him well. And he was just like a 6-year-old little boy. So the head of the hospital at that point says, like, oh, I brought him into the office. We gave him some juice boxes and some cookies while we were trying to figure out what to do with him. And they were like, he was polite. He said, like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, and like was well behaved and, told them all the information he could about his family. And luckily, they were eventually able to reunite him with his family shortly thereafter. But this was the mentality for far too long about if someone is out on the streets acting in a way that was deemed inappropriate by the white people in power, they would be picked up and dropped off at an asylum or sent to jail.
Do we want to just really quick define the Jim Crow era or Jim Crow laws, like that time period?
Yes. So I want to look it up so I am
I have it in front of me too.
Okay, why don't you tell me what you found?
1877 to 1964 is essentially where, slavery was abolished, but there was legalized segregation and discrimination against African Americans. So, I mean, there were laws set up and stuff, but that defines sort of that time period. And I mean, all the way till the 60s where segregation finally, ended. And what's interesting enough too,
even then ended is questionable at certain points.
Right. But the fact that you're talking about Maryland too, which isn't even really considered part of the South.
Yeah.
And
it's more kind of in the middle.
Right. That it was going on there. But just so that we all have like kind of an idea of what that is. And that was named after like a racist minstrel show character. And it's like symbolizing the derogatory like view of Black people. So Jim Crow, like I don't know. It's just an interesting time period. It's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that up because originally Crownsville was considered a Negro asylum or an African-American asylum. It was integrated far before segregation was gotten rid of. I would say probably about 10 to 15 years before laws came into place, mostly because the other asylums in Maryland were overcrowded. And so they needed somewhere to send these other people. And so they were going to have to send white people because there was nowhere else to house them. And so obviously that didn't go over very well with a lot of people. There were also issues at Crownsville, being one of the 3 major asylums in Maryland, not getting the same amount of funding because it was historically known as the African-American asylum. And so it was not getting the appropriate money, funding, staffing, all of that stuff. So there's another very interesting part of the book where, as I said before, they were housing children as young as 4 or 5 years old. And so they had separate units for children, which most of those children didn't necessarily have mental health issues. A percentage of them had developmental disabilities, but some of them were just, kids who were maybe a little too mouthy to a police officer or to a teacher and were picked up and dropped off there. And then either parents were never informed or parents didn't have the means to follow up with them. Because that's another big part of that is, I'm skipping ahead, but when we talk about deinstitutionalization of asylums, the point was that people did better when they were at home with their communities, being able to function while also getting treatment instead of just being all treatment all the time, treatment in quotes, because at that time, treatment was not necessarily effective. And a lot of the deinstitutionalization was in tandem, I'm like in coincidence, that's not the right word, in tandem with the advent of those original antipsychotics, because we were finding, hey, these antipsychotics are making people better. Let's get them back home so they can get back to their lives, back to their families, back to their jobs, because this medication is better than medicating them and keeping them in a room with 30 other people just roaming around doing nothing. So the idea of deinstitutionalization was really groundbreaking and intended. It had good intents. What the reality of it was, and especially for those of minority identity, was that a lot of those folks didn't have community to go back to. Maybe they didn't have any surviving family members, or family members didn't have the means to come and get them or to take them in and take care of them. They didn't have job skills because they'd been in these institutions for a long time. They didn't have money or savings to help them even once they got their bus ticket out of the place to get where they needed to go. And so the system that was set up to help people be at home and heal, while the idea was good, the logistics of it didn't work for, honestly, the majority of people. A lot of white people were affected by it as well, but it was disproportionately unfair to people of African American descent.
I feel like that mirrors a lot of like someone who's being leaving jail, sort of
Yes.
not having then that follow-up, that
Yes.
that access to continue in life and resources.
Well, and I'm glad that you bring that up because, there was this seismic shift from an asylum system to a prison system, and they did happen at the same amount of time, where funding was shifted, and the funding towards mental health with deinstitutionalization, it wasn't funneled there. All of those, the point of deinstitutionalization was that the federal government would no longer be responsible for asylums, and that each state would set up community mental health centers. Mm-hmm. However, states didn't have the funding or the knowledge or the lands or the buildings to make these community mental health centers. And so this deinstitutionalization happened so quickly that there was no path to set up this kind of aftercare or this wraparound care that we call it now. And so that's why we were having many, many more people homeless now on the street with mental health issues. This was also happening shortly thereafter. People were returning from war with mental health issues and not necessarily getting the help from the Veterans Association or trusting the Veterans Association to seek help. And so all of this was kind of the perfect storm happening at the same time. But back to, the beginning of Crownsville was, again, it was more just kind of a warehousing effect of keeping people in the system because their families could not take care of them, or, the families were desperate and at the end of their rope because they're saying, my family member is sick and needs help. Can you help them? Putting their trust in the system that really didn't truly understand what people were going through, especially in the context of the end of slavery, of continued racism. And so something that comes up a lot is that, people are going into these asylums and they're not seeing doctors who look like them. Right. And the doctors who are there not only don't look like them, but don't understand the context of my family was enslaved. I'm a free American, and I put that in quotes because, were we really treating people like Americans? Are we still treating people like Americans? No. But, it's this context of this seismic shift of what people are, quote unquote, allowed or not allowed to do, but then not having access to those services or access to those opportunities that were supposed to be allowed to everyone. And then working with these people who they too lived in that slave era and maybe have this mentality or this family generational idea passed down about what it means to be a Black person and what problems Black people have, and not really understanding that being thrown into this new era of freedom without opportunity, that in itself can cause trauma. That in itself can cause mental health problems or, push things off. So there's this really interesting story about this gentleman who was showing some signs of possible paranoid schizophrenia, but was highly intelligent, very well educated, had a lot of things going for him, and essentially had been kind of afraid to ask for mental health treatment. When it got to the point where he actually went to a courthouse steps and threatened a guard and was like, somebody has to help me. If somebody doesn't help me, you should just kill me. And he was shot on the courthouse steps and died. And so that was kind of this desperate situation that a lot of people have been in, especially when you don't have the privilege of being white or passing as white, or having opportunity to those higher level systems of feeling really stuck between death or insanity. And knowing insanity, there's no help for that. So, and I'm a burden to my family. I don't know what to do. I don't trust anyone. And so those are kind of those two sides of the coin that people were faced with, and how that in itself can kind of drive you crazy. The other part too that's really interesting that comes up is, are you familiar with the cartoon on Cartoon Network, The Boondocks?
Don't think so.
So the producer of that, he's actually produced and written a lot of shows. I believe he was a writer on Everyone Loves Chris, and he's done a lot of those African-American centric shows talking about what that real life experience is to grow up or to be in a Black family. And so he tells a story about how he distinctly remembers as a child, an aunt of his was sent to Crownsville because she was clearly having some mental health issues, and how no one in the family would talk about it. Because at that point, Crownsville was kind of a threat. Like, oh, if you act up, you're going to get sent to Crownsville.
Sent there.
If you're a problem, you're going to go to Crownsville. No one's ever going to hear from you again. And then the shame associated with it. Like, the family doesn't want to talk about who went there and what happened there. And so even throughout the book, they keep checking in with him. And even towards the end of the book where things have changed, Crownsville has closed and they're trying to make it, a historic place, how he still isn't sure that he wants to know what happened to his aunts and the story, because it's too painful, to know that. And he even tells a story about how he remembers at a family picnic, like her having a meltdown and everyone just kind of turning away and not looking. And so I think that transcends race, where a lot of people don't want to look at and acknowledge mental health problems. We want to pretend it's not there, or we want to pretend that's someone else's issue when it does impact everyone. So I said there were a couple of medical crossovers in this book. One is Henrietta Lacks.
Oh, yes.
So interestingly,
we'll have to cover that.
Yes, you definitely have to cover that, because
that'll be next year.
Black History story.
We have a whole other year.
I mean, you could cover her at any time, but definitely. But interestingly enough, her firstborn child, the story goes that she was born at home by accident, like not intentionally. Mm-hmm. And when she essentially slid out of the birth canal, hit her head. And they believe she had a developmental disability from birth. Now, we don't know if she was already born that way or if it was a brain injury at birth, but regardless, she had severe developmental disabilities and was sent to Crownsville and was there for all of her life. And there's stories about Henrietta going and visiting her until she could no longer because of her own health issues. But I feel like those are two really big stories in African American history about the healthcare systems letting people down, the mental health care system letting her daughter down, the healthcare system letting her down, and how, these people were doing just what they thought was right. She knew that her daughter needed help and she didn't know what to do. So, okay, this place is supposed to help take care of those children who have problems. I'm going to send her there. And she even said there was a note that I think it was like some family member of Henrietta went with her on that very last visit to her daughter, whose name was Elsie. And they don't know if Henrietta was just being hopeful, like knowing her own health struggle. But she's like, oh, she looks good. she looks clean. She looks well taken care of. And it's sad to think that that's all people were expecting of an asylum, was that their child was clean and well taken care of.
Sad.
Yeah. So another interesting crossover is they talk about sickle cell disease and how some of those folks, not all of them, but some of them were sent to asylums because they were not believed about their pain or their illness. Right. Or on the flip side, they were in asylums and then they had no community or no family because everyone had died of sickle cell. So if they weren't a carrier themselves, just had the trait, their family members had their own health issues that were being untreated and going ignored. And so then they could not come and help them or come and visit them. So there was that. And then I talked before about the rise of the original antipsychotics and how that essentially was, and this is a throwback to my last episode, it was a chemical lobotomy. Mm-hmm. So we talked about lobotomy in the last episode, and that was what a lot of people called those original first-line antipsychotics was a chemical lobotomy, because it was calming people down, but it was also taking away that zest of life or that connection to reality and what was going on. And so when that happened in the mental health system at large, it was still happening in these asylums that were underfunded, that did not have the best healthcare, that did not have the best environment for everyone. Prior to the segregation happening, there were significant efforts made to at least prior to segregation being abolished, there were significant efforts made to integrate the staff so that there were more African American people working at Crownsville. And that did happen. And they did have a lot of very well-known and highly educated Black doctors coming and working there from time to time. But what was happening was the struggle was these now professionals being on the other side of it and seeing people that they literally grew up with or they knew their family members not getting the treatment that they deserved and feeling so kind of caught in the middle of the system of they're doing everything they can, but the system is stacked against them. And so how that was really difficult for a lot of folks. But it's really, there's a beautiful scene in the book where at the very end, they go to visit these now grounds that are supposed to be made up of something. And it's so many of the doctors and nurses who had worked there in their young age. Now they're in their 70s and their 80s, and they're going back because they remember those patients. And they want to go and say their names. So there's this really beautiful scene where throughout the years, the 93 years that Crownsville was in service in action, whatever we want to call it. Multiple people had died on the campus, some by violent means, some just by natural causes, because many people were institutionalized for life. So people were dying of old age. And so they're doing this dedication ceremony to preserve a cemetery area. And at that time, because there were so many people and so many of them didn't have family to come and claim the bodies, they were just buried by number. And so there was this whole project to assign names to those numbers, get new headstones and clean up the cemetery. And so they do this ceremony, I believe it's every year, I don't have the date right in front of me, called the Say My Name ceremony, where whoever wants to shows up and they're each given a name and you speak aloud the name of the person who was there and, remember them and that they are a person, not a number. And they said that's kind of where that phrase came from. I'm sure you've heard it before in mental health care and medical care. But in general, like being more than just this, chart number, being a person,
a human.
Yeah, a human. And there's also some really beautiful stories of people who went to Crownsville and were able to leave and move on with their lives. There's this one young woman who had a really, really difficult start in her college life where she had tried to join a sorority and there was a lot of abuse there, especially against the Black sorority members. And then unfortunately she was sexually assaulted by someone at her college. And there was just a lot of things went on and she had what they call a mental breakdown, and was sent to Crownsville. And just by some stroke of luck, one of the girls who was at Crownsville went to high school with her, like a staff member. Oh, wow. And so, she told the other staff, like, look, I know this girl, I know her. And they all just came around her and really gave her the support that she needed. And she was able to recover and go home and live a full life after. So there were some success stories, just far less than one would hope for an institution of that size and that magnitude. I believe at maximum, their capacity was supposed to be, 1,500 beds. And I know that they had over 3,000 people at one point. People were sleeping 2 to a bed, as I said. People of all ages. This Wikipedia page is not correct because, like I said, I read the whole book. They said the youngest was 14. They talk about children multiple times throughout the book in a separate ward area. So maybe they're talking about more of the general area, but there definitely were children up to the elderly there. There were people who had physical ailments. So lots of people with epilepsy, brain tumors, tuberculosis, physical ailments that there was just nowhere else for them to go. So they were dropped off at the asylum, which then we understand, especially with something like tuberculosis, how that's really bad to have someone who has a communicable disease in a large setting like
institutional settings. That's why we still check if you're going to work in a hospital and prisons.
Even little things like scabies, that's going to run rampant. Not that scabies is little, but you're not going to die from scabies.
Right.
But things like that, smallpox, scarlet fever, which, pretty early on, they realized the need to check for that and to isolate, but still their quarantine was just in a smaller ward. So they're like, oh, well, we'll have 15 people get it instead of 45 people get it.
Lovely.
Yeah. So, but it was this hospital was the least funded. They had the least access to ways to control this stuff. And so they were doing the best that they could. And again, like I said, even though there was that disparaging? That's not the right word. Disparity. There we go.
There we go.
This disparity between white staff and Black patients. There are many stories about how there were good staff members. They weren't all bad. There were staff members who cared and took care of people, but it was more of the exception to the rule than the norm, unfortunately. And then as they continued to integrate the staff, there was better care for as much options that they had. Mm-hmm. You can give the best care that you can, but if you only have 5 beds and 15 people in a ward, it's not going to be great. They talk about how this one ward literally only had 1 shower stall and 1 washcloth for 45 men.
Okay. Yeah.
And how the nurses would often go home and sew up things or make things and bring them in. Or how some people started doing little things for patients, like having a parade day where they would make their own little floats and invite family members, and they would make sure all the patients had their best clothes on. And if they didn't have good clothes, they would let them borrow clothes for that day. So definitely staff was trying to make it the best that they could for people. But the other part of the difficulty with having a large census and lower resources is, like I said before, they couldn't turn people away. So if you've already got too many people that you can't feed and house, and then they're dropping off people every day from jail or from the street for no good reason, and you can't say no, like it's set up to fail. It's a system set up to fail. Later on, they were able to do more of these transfers where they would temporarily hold people. There's a story about these 3 protesters who were essentially trying to do sit-ins. So in the segregated restaurants, they would just go in and sit down, and they were sent to the mental asylum because as part of their protest, they went on a hunger strike. And so it was like, well, you got to be crazy if you're not going to eat.
Oh, geez.
So we're going to send you.
Right.
And luckily, they were only there briefly, and the people on staff were in support of their protest. And we're like, there's nothing wrong with these people. They chose not to eat because they're demonstrating their civil rights. And that's what they're fighting for. They're not crazy. And so luckily there were stories like that where the staff, regardless of their own race, were in support of people who, these people don't belong here. This is not what this place is for. Like, why are we using our resources for these people? Yeah. And things like that happened far more often than they needed to, unfortunately. Of course, in things like this, there were a lot of deaths. Some of them were from violence in the asylum, either from other patients or from staff who were too aggressive. There was at one point this idea that if people tried to escape, that they would be killed if they tried to escape. But then also if they were escaping, the conditions of where this asylum weren't necessarily great. So there was a stream nearby. So if it was in the winter, you would die from exposure if you went out there because there's nowhere to go. You're now stuck in the woods and there's a stream and that's all there is. Or people would get lost or unfortunately, picked up by people who were not in support of them and then would assault them or things like that. So a lot of really negative things went on at this time that just these people just wanted to be free. And a lot of them didn't necessarily belong there. I'm trying to see what else did I have here. There's a lot. They talk a lot about the administration and who was superintendent and what they wanted. I was focused more on the patient experience and what mental health care was. They did do a small amount of lobotomies, but no more than not an unusual number. And I think honestly, it's because they just couldn't afford it. They didn't have the means to afford for that sort of thing, but they did do shock therapy. They did use what we had talked about, that malaria drug. We had talked about that last time, using that to induce seizures.
Right.
They did use some of that. And then, of course, using a lot of sedatives, hydrotherapy. But they did say that they did at times just put people in chains, unfortunately.
Wow.
So not necessarily treating people the best, but they make it seem like some people just didn't have, some of the staff didn't have other options. And then in other stories, it's like with the chains, they're like, okay, there were other options. Like that person just was not doing the appropriate treatment.
Right.
There's another really interesting story about how there was this one woman there who was very problematic. It always just kind of liked to set off staff, set off the other patients, to the point where they were starting to debate, we don't think she has a mental health problem, maybe a personality disorder, but she's way too together. She knows everything that's going on. And this one point she climbed out onto the roof and was threatening to jump. And a staff member came out on the roof and she picked up the staff member and brought her back inside and was like, no, you're not coming out here. So it's clearly this woman wasn't going to kill herself. She was doing this for attention, but also she wasn't going to put that staff member in danger either. So it's is this woman crazy? It doesn't sound like it.
Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah. So as I said, eventually Crownsville closed, I want to say in 2021 or 2020, that's very crazy. Late. At that point, they had a very, very small census. And then everyone who was there were sent to other neighboring asylums who could take them. But the memorial park itself, which was named Crownsville Hospital Memorial Park, was acquired by the county. And so the state of Maryland purchased it to own it and then to make it into this park in December 2022. And so the master plan started unrolling in 2023. So it's not that long ago that they were doing this. No. And so the plan the final master plan was scheduled to be released in February 2025. So everyone that they've talked to, administrative wise, people who are in control of this land, everyone's kind of on the same page, regardless of their political leanings, because they do talk about Republicans versus Democrats and how they have differing views on mental health. But it seemed like everybody was on the same page as far as this is historic land. We need to tell the story of what it is. We need to protect the land. So at least that's a positive. They do talk about in the book some other interesting things. What I was just talking about is that transition from the asylums to correctional facilities that I believe it was a crazy number, like 65 former asylums in the United States were just essentially relabeled as jails. And so that was also part of the connection, is not just that system we were talking about. Of, now we call it the system of reincarceration, but it used to be that system of rehospitalization. How some of that has perpetuated because it was literally the same people, same building. Let's just call it a different name.
Wow.
And then, as we know, the criminal justice system is not always geared towards justice for those who are not white. So that is also perpetuating that same prejudice that we were seeing in the mental health system, but now in the correctional system. And again, is that misunderstanding of mental health, the overdiagnosis in the past of schizophrenia in Black men versus in white men, even though they were displaying the same behaviors. And just this, as I was alluding to, this misunderstanding of the Black experience and labeling things as mental health or problematic that were a natural reaction to injustice. And I feel like that still happens today. I would like to hope that it's not to the same extent, but I'm also not blind to what's going on in the state of our world and how we're not treating people who are not white in fair ways. So I'm not going to get too political here, but I see it. I'm not blind to it, and I'm not down with it. It's not what I'm okay with. And for anyone out there, if you ever come across me and you need help, I'm an ally. I'm here to help you. I'm not going to be waving down those people who are not cool to take you away. That's not okay with me.
So this is just, we have a historic, I'm sure you're familiar with, psychiatric hospital in New Jersey that's still existing. It was built in the 1800s.
Yeah, they don't do as much treatment anymore, though. They have a very small active ward, but still, it is still in existence.
That still has like a lot of history as far as...
And they do mostly forensic work now.
Okay, yeah. I think it is. It's people who have that, there's a word for it. It's not criminally insane, but there's like a word. They have there's a certain rating or certain, I can't remember it when I used to work.
There's different tiers.
There's like a name label for it, but I think
I might have to cover that eventually because it's just really interesting. And then, like you said, it's been around since the 1800s, and it's there in the underground tunnels and all that cool stuff that we've always heard, like rumors about growing up in New Jersey and knowing about this asylum that we've had here. Although I will say, Trenton Psychiatric, you don't want to go there at night. That place looks like out of horror movies.
So I'm actually thinking about the other one, Greystone.
No, I know. That's what
Greystone,
I'm saying. I'm just saying in addition to Greystone, yes.
Yeah. So it's just interesting. These things were all over the place, and some of them are still functioning today in maybe different forms. But
and I think that's part of the conversation too. Is this whole idea of deinstitutionalization? It wasn't really realistic. We do still need some of those facilities, but those facilities need the proper funding and the proper staffing. And I don't know if that's necessarily changed as much as we would like. But do we need to be institutionalizing everyone? Absolutely not. And I think that's what the purpose of deinstitutionalization should have been, but that's not what happened in practice.
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting the way these things have changed, but we still have.
So in the show notes, I'll be linking the book, and there's some really interesting articles. There's an interview with the author. And I think the state of Maryland is doing its best to keep the story alive, not bury it, not do a revisionist history of it, but also I don't know what mental health care is, if it's much different for people of color. I would like to hope that it is, but as I said, I'm also a realist and know that not everyone is given the same opportunities for health, and it's still a broken system. And that's where it comes to folks like you and me to just do our best, one patient at a time. I actually want to end on it. There's a really, the story made me tear up a little bit. I think it's like a folk tale, or like, I can't think of the word when people like tell a story, but it's not a real story, but it has like a fable.
A fable, yeah.
Yeah. So there's this little boy, he's on the beach and hundreds of thousands of starfish have washed up. And he just keeps picking them up one by one and throwing them in the ocean. An adult comes over to him and is like laughing. He's like, what are you doing? You can't save them all. And he goes, but I can save one at a time. It's like that. I feel like that's what we try to do each day. Like maybe we can't fix the system, but we can try to fix things for one person or one family.
Yeah. At a time. Just giving that individual attention to one human as much as we can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting stuff. So we did my last episode was a Black History Month. This one is a bummer on that end.
It's a bummer, but it's a story that needs to be told. People need to be aware. It's
important to understand our history and not forget where that
we need to know where we've been so we can do better moving forward.
Exactly. My next episode is a mashup on it's Heart Month as well.
Yeah, I saw that.
And so this is a positive story, and the main character is an African American who later does get credit for what they do. So
good.
We'll see how that one goes. We'll take you guys on a journey, the ups and downs.
I mean, I feel like we're always on a journey. It just depends on what direction we're going in. This month, we're going in a little bit more correct direction, hopefully. Positive direction.
Don't worry. We'll have some wacky episodes at some point, too, where it's a little less serious.
I'm going to need something not serious because I've had a lot of heavy topics and I've got a lot of heavy topics planned ahead. So I'm going to need some redonkulousness in the future.
Specifically, redonkulousness. That's the term.
Yes.
Okay.
Shenanigans.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
And more singing. We need more singing by you.
No, I can always do that. I sang a little before.
You did.
Yeah, I'll try.
All right.
This isn't a singing episode.
No.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for listening to Medical Media Mixer.
The perfect cocktail. Cheers.
Cheers.
I could not drink this. It was too licoricey. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Medical Media Mixer podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps others find the show. Want to keep the conversation going? Follow us on social media. We're at Medical Media Mixer Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and on Pinterest, the Medical Media Mixer board.
If you'd like to support the show and help us grow, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast. And on Buy Me a Coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast. If you have a topic idea, feedback, or just want to say hi, send us an email at medicalmediamixer@gmail.com. You can also stream all of our episodes and find more info on our website, medicalmediamixer.podbean.com. We're available on all major podcast platforms, so no matter where you listen, we're there. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep mixing medicine and media.